Welcome back. Just taking some measurements here and making a couple of sketches. This is part 4 of the Vanity project, and today we're going to build that decorative panel for the end of the Vanity. Now, I've been milling some lumber and I've got a few pieces cut, but it's time to do the really interesting part, so let's get going. Okay, the first thing that I did was I cut a couple of pieces of walnut to width for the bottom. And what this is sized for is so that it comes up exactly to the bottom of the face frame. And I've cut a miter in this corner because this is going to be positioned right here, and the other piece will run that direction along the toe kick. And then our decorative end panel will sit on top of this so that it's symmetrical with the face frame. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a second. All right, now I cut out some walnut and I've used the same dimensions as on the face frame of the Vanity. This top rail is 1 3/4 wide. The two stiles are 1.5 inches. And this bottom one will be 1 inch, but I haven't ripped it to size yet, and there's a reason for that. In addition to that, I have also prepared some maple stock, and I've jointed an edge and ripped this to 2 3/16 inches wide. I've not cut it to length yet because we don't know yet what the length is going to be, but we'll know pretty shortly. The first thing we need to do is we need to do a little bit more preparatory work on this walnut. And for that, we're going to go to the router table. All right, so the next step is to route a groove along the inside edge of the rails and stiles that were cut out in walnut. Now to do that, I've set up a 1/4 inch bit and I've got it set 1/4 inch high. And then I adjusted the fence until I got that in the center, and now we're ready to route. Okay, it should be pretty obvious to you now why I did not want to rip the bottom rail down to its final 1 inch thickness before I routed this groove. This is scary enough as it is. By the way, you've heard some pretty nasty noises coming out of the router and some chatter. And the reason is because the what's cut is being left in the groove. And that's because I didn't have a spiral upcut bit. A spiral upcut bit would pull these chips down so the dust collector could take them out of the groove as the cut was being made. But you got to get by sometimes with what you have. Okay, now while I'm set up here at the router table to cut the grooves, I'm going to go ahead and cut the grooves in this maple stock that I milled previously. And you'll notice that both on the walnut and on the maple, I've marked the edge where I want to cut the groove, and I've also marked the side that's going to be the face side. That way I can orient the face side the same way on every cut. And that way, if the groove is not absolutely perfectly in the center, you've still got a chance of it coming out right. But you really want this groove to be in the middle. Now, if this was making some noise on the walnut, I can imagine it's going to really make some noise on this maple. But let's get going. right, so now with the groove cut, I'll go ahead and cut this bottom rail to its final 1-inch width. All right, now I've mocked up this frame with a couple of clamps to hold it into place. Grooves are on the inside, faces up on the frame. And I've checked it for square just to make sure we're in good shape there. And we have our maple pieces with the groove cut in it. So what are we doing here exactly? Well, it's really pretty simple. We cut this at 2 3/16. And the reason is because I'm going to form a 3/16 1/4-inch wide tenon, the length of this, that'll fit into this groove. And then we'll essentially make 2 stiles and 2 rails to fit inside this frame. So, need to get some dimensions, and because we're going to have a 3/16 inch tenon fitting into a 1/4-inch slot, I'm going to take the length dimension. This will be the dimension for the stiles. It's 28 inches. So we want to make that 3/16 extra at this end and 3/16 extra at this end. So this is going to be 28 3/8. All right, now cutting the tenon on the ends of the boards is by far the hardest part. What I've done is I've taken both stiles and I've clamped them together with a sacrificial board on the back, and I'm just running those through real slowly and real carefully. Okay, so we get a little bit of splintering, but that's not too bad. Now I'm going to move the backer board over and cut the other side. Okay, that last operation was a little tricky. This one is actually going to be pretty easy. Now this is set up so that this runs through this way, not this way, this way. And we just got to run these through and make our tenon. And there we go. We got a little chip out here because we're running against the grain on that side, but that's going to be okay. All right, now that the 2 stiles are milled, I've once again mocked this up, put some clamps on it to hold it, double checked it to make sure it's square, and now we can measure and get the length of our rails. And the distance between here is 13 5/16, and then we want to add 3/16 inch on both ends for our tenons. And so that will be our final length dimension, and we'll just mill those pieces exactly the same way. Now after cutting, these tenons may need a little bit of fine tuning, and the shoulder plane is perfect for that task because it'll get you a nice clean corner and shave off just 1/1000th at a time. Just make sure that when you're shaving, that you shave from both sides, so you wind up with the faces of your boards meeting up. Perfect. All right, now with that all clamped together, the last step is to get this dimension. And what this is going to be is a glued up walnut panel. And it'll have the same tenon cut all the way around, and it'll fit right inside here. So now we're going walnut, maple, walnut, and I hope to put a pretty grain pattern right here that'll be eye-catching. So let's get those dimensions, and I'll glue up a panel that's oversized. We'll cut it down to size, and we'll mill the tenon, and we'll be ready to go. All right, now I've picked out the boards that I want to use for the panel. This is oversized by quite a bit, actually. It's going to have 1.5 inches or so cut off each side and probably close to 1 inch off the end. But I've got the pattern the way I want it. I've made marks on here so I know, and I'm ready to glue up. Now, on a large panel or a structural panel, I'm pretty likely to use festool dominoes to get the panel pieces aligned. But this is a relatively small panel, and because of the way it's going to be captured inside that frame, it's going to be very strong already. So I don't have to go crazy getting it perfectly flat. I don't have to go crazy either because I made all these boards slightly over thick. That way I can just run them through the drum sander and get everything nice and flat and even. We're going to get some squeeze out here. I'll let that set up for 20-30 minutes, and then I'll scrape off the rubbery glue so it doesn't leave marks. But again, not too worried about it because I'm going to put the whole panel through the drum sander, and any glue that's on there will quickly disappear. I'm just going to put a couple clamps on top just to equalize the pressure. All right, it's time for a cup of coffee. Let that set up for a little bit. All right, now I'm going to trim this to width in 2 passes so I can try to keep this little interesting section here right in the center. I've done a little fitting and trimming with the shoulder plane, and we're ready to glue up. So what we're going to do, because this is essentially a solid wood panel, and there will probably be some minor expansion and contraction, particularly in a bathroom because it's humid, I'm only going to put one little spot of glue in the middle right here for this first panel. Just a tiny little spot of glue right in the middle. And that way I won't have to worry about it buckling or cracking. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing up here. Squeeze out I'm not worried about this time. As much as I hate squeeze out, you're probably surprised to hear that. We're assembling this from the inside out. All right, there we go. In a couple hours, it'll be ready for the drum sander. After the glue had set up sufficiently, I took the panel out of the clamps and I ran it a couple of passes both directions through the drum sander. I then brought it back over here and went over the whole panel with the random orbit sander to remove any scratches left by the drum sander. After I did that, well, I decided I should look for glue and scratches. Now, you know the trick, I'm sure, of using a little mineral spirits, wiping it on, and looking for remnants of glue, and also looking at any scratches that may be left in the surface of the wood. But the mineral spirits dry pretty quick, and it's kind of hard to go over it and really get a good look at the whole piece. So since the entire cabinet is going to be coated with several coats of shellac before the top coat is put on, I decided to go ahead and put a coat of shellac on this panel, and that allowed me to really see it to see if there were any scratches left that I needed to sand out. It looks pretty good, and here's the finished project for the end panel of the Vanity. I think that looks a lot better than a plain plywood end panel. So we've got one more step we need to do before we attach this and build the rest of the frame. Let's go take a look at that. All right, now I'm sure you remember this mitered piece that we cut for here to establish the height of the panel, but this is going to be a permanent part of the construction, and I want to glue this to the panel, but I want to get it in exactly the right location so my miter is nice and tight. And obviously if this moves out or in, it changes the tightness of the miter. You can see as I move it back, the miter opens up. So what I've done is I've taped the miter together on the leading edge here, and I'm using this to position it. And once I get it in position, I'll clamp it into place. Scoot it out just a little bit more. There we go. Clamp that into place. Clamp the other end into place. And now I can put the panel up here and put a registration mark so that I can glue this to the panel in the perfect spot. All right, now there's my registration mark. I'll now glue this panel to this piece, and then the whole panel can be installed on the cabinet. Now, unfortunately, we've kind of run out of time again, and we need to go through the rest of the framework construction. And we're going to do that a little different than we did on the small cabinet. We're going to build the back frame essentially like a face frame, and then install the whole thing at one time. So be sure and come back for the next video to see that. And thank you again so much for watching this video.